Freedom, my friends, is a divine gift. Freedom is divine. Welcome, Vanakkam, Vande Matram. Blessed Independence Day for all my fellow countrymen, my brothers and sisters, comprising the 145 crore blessed Indians. A wonderful people like nowhere else. I greet all of you on this day and I bend my knees before God for the gift of our freedom. And because I consider freedom to be spiritual, not merely spiritual, but spiritual in its essence, having varied expressions, whether it be in the political domain, social domain, economic domain, religious domain, interpersonal domain, institutional domain, in all walks of life, in every stage of life, freedom is a fundamental issue. You can't imagine, or I can't imagine, humanity without freedom. That's the reason why freedom figures in every list of fundamental rights evolved at any stage in the history of our species. Now, because I believe that in its essence, freedom is divine, or freedom is spiritual, or as Gandhi believed, freedom is God's assurance to human beings. The reason why he thought of himself as an instrument in the hand of God to lead the people of India to freedom. He believed that colonization was a spiritual evil. He believed that every organized or unorganized attempt to minimize or abolish human freedom at any level is satanic, is diabolic, and must be resisted, but resisted in a divine manner, not in a diabolic manner. I feel urged on this day, the 15th of August, as a nation celebrates freedom, to raise a fundamental question. Does celebrating freedom ceremonially imply that we understand or respect freedom? Does celebrating freedom routinely as per the national calendar prove that we are committed in truth and spirit to freedom? Or are we, as Dostoevsky once said, afraid of freedom? On this occasion, I remember reading a book by the American author Eric Fromm, Escape from Freedom. Escape from Freedom, where he says that human beings are scared, are afraid of being free. So they invent all sorts of ways, some ingenious, some crude, vulgar, to escape from freedom. Because, as Dostoevsky also said, freedom makes the idea of responsibility very real and compelling. And many human beings are incapable of accepting responsibility. They feel burdened by responsibility. Therefore, Dostoevsky went to the extent of saying that we are tormented by our freedom. So, on the one hand, we are passionately in love with freedom. On the other hand, we are tormented by freedom. So, this contradiction, which is native to human nature, needs to be kept at the center of our thinking on freedom. But I don't want to take a detour along those lines in our thinking together this morning. Rather, I want to confine our thinking to one particular question which is of pressing importance in the Indian context, and that is celebrating freedom in any amount of honesty compatible with post-truth politics? I raise this question because this question is not raised by people who should be raising it. In fact, this should be the foremost question that is raised in the Indian context by anyone who cares anything at all for freedom. Anyone who values freedom will raise this question. Is freedom compatible with politics of untruth or post-truth politics? By the way, this clumsy formulation, post-truth politics, can be very simply put as politics of hypocrisy. But put in that manner, it doesn't sound very pleasing to the ear. So we take the circumlocutus way of saying post-truth politics. Actually, your tongue wouldn't move smoothly with that title, post-truth politics, whereas it's a lot easier to say politics of hypocrisy or hypocritical politics, because that sounds rather unpleasant. But precisely that's what it is. Now, the reason why I want to project this question as a foremost question that anyone, anywhere in the world who is committed to freedom of human beings needs to raise, namely, is freedom compatible with post-truth politics or politics of hypocrisy? Is that today a gulf is developing between celebrating freedom and affirming freedom in real terms for citizens in all categories comprising a body politic or a society. So the ceremonial affirmation of freedom on the one hand and the practical denial of freedom on the other hand, in multifarious ways. And this is something that we need to be mindful of. Now, in particular, let me focus on Mahatma Gandhi, because you can't think of the freedom of this country without bringing Mahatma Gandhi center stage. Though we have forgotten Mahatma Gandhi and we celebrate our freedom. Why did Gandhi put all the focus on truth in the pursuit of India's liberation from foreign yoke or foreign slavery? What was the logic of this? Gandhi, as many of us know, was a shrewd student of history. He was also very deeply spiritual in his understanding of human reality. He was a very radical thinker and a profound reader. And he was someone who tried to bridge, if not completely abolish, the gulf between appearance and reality. And he therefore shifted the emphasis from external appearances to inner reality. It was this that liberated him, for example, from the need to flaunt clothes and appearances. You see, clothes are part of our appearances. He discovered the power of the naked body because he realized the real truth is truth within. And then he understood that the secret of that inner truth is, inner freedom is truth. So two propositions. Real freedom is freedom within. Proposition number two, the secret of that inner freedom is truth. That's how Gandhi connected freedom to truth and gave freedom a spiritual interpretation, a divine affirmation by saying, truth is God. Truth is God. So three things, a trinity of ideas. First of all, freedom. True freedom is inner freedom or spiritual freedom. The essence of that inner freedom is truth. Truth is God. You see how beautifully he works it out? These are very cardinal, fundamental thoughts which we cannot afford to neglect. But unfortunately, now that we have institutionalized hypocritical politics or post-truth politics, we have all agreed that truth is dispensable, it is an unnecessary encumbrance, and smart people can manage life without truth, banking alone on untruth. As a result, even our banking system is now taking a beating. So, it's very important for us to realize that true freedom is freedom of our inner life, which also means that the truth about me, the truth about what I feel, the truth about what I think, the truth about what I really want to do and to be in my life should be in a state of freedom by which it can express itself. Now, today, if I don't feel free to think without inhibition and share my ideas and insights with people without feeling deeply insecure, then where is my freedom? Today, if I feel inhibited in my feelings and emotions regarding people anywhere in the world, suppose I say something good about a Pakistani, something good about a Bangladeshi, something good about a Chinese friend of mine, would I be stigmatized as an anti-national character? I'm a Christian living in Kerala. For Christians in Kerala, it's a very difficult thing to say something good about their fellow Muslim brothers and sisters in Kerala. This is not political, this is religious. So how religiously free am I? So at all levels, we find that freedom is choked, strangulated. And at the same time, our eagerness to celebrate freedom and the scale on which we celebrate our freedom is enlarging. Now, in order to understand this better, let me introduce a little bit of philosophy into our discussion. I'll try and make it as simple as I can. Because such understanding is very crucial. And unless and until real understanding spreads in a society, that society cannot be expected to be a responsible and competent guardian of the gift of freedom. We all have a duty to guard our freedom. As Nehru said, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. So now let's understand freedom. Now, freedom can be understood in 1,000 ways. I'm going to take just one strand of thought. From a philosophical point of view, freedom has, I've said something very briefly about the spiritual idea of freedom. There's a great deal to be said about the spiritual perspective on freedom, but that's not what I want to do here. Let me confine myself to one single idea from the philosophical understanding of freedom. From this perspective, freedom has two dimensions. It's very easy to remember. One is native freedom and the other is conditional freedom. I'll explain what that means very, very simply. Conditional freedom, which let me take first. Conditional freedom refers to the freedom that the individual becomes able to exercise and enjoy given that certain conditionalities are obtained. For example, my freedom to read a book depends on the conditionality that I am literate, on the conditionality that I can read and understand. Even if I am literate, but if my capacity to understand is underdeveloped, then I won't be able to read many rewarding books. I am free to work, but unless I am healthy, I cannot work. So the conditionality of health and the provisions to maintain my health or meet my health needs must exist for me to be free in the conditional aspect of my freedom. I am free to move around. But for me to move around, peace must prevail in our society. Suppose I am living in an area where communal rights are endemic. My life will be mostly confined to my house. I can't get out of the house. So, my freedom of movement, to be real, must meet the conditionality that there is a peaceful society in which I can live. So, instances can be multiplied. I hope the idea of conditional freedom is now fairly clear. Now, native freedom. Native freedom is the freedom that any living organism becomes entitled to for being born what it is. For example, a bird is free to fly because the capacity to fly is native to the bird for being born a bird. A fish can swim underwater for long durations. I cannot do so. I may not even be able to swim, for what you know. A fish can swim because it's part of its native freedom. So, human beings, all of us, by being born human, have certain native freedoms. For example, we have the freedom to imagine a state, a condition of life, which is different to what exists today, which is a freedom not available to human beings. Or to take another example, we have the freedom to rise above our natural instincts. For example, when Jesus says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, show the other, he is saying, look, rise above the natural instincts and impulses. Our natural instinct is to give a harder blow in return. But you can overcome that instinct, or what psychologists call instinctual conditioning. That's a technical term for it. Instinctual, adjective of instinct, conditioning. We get conditioned by our instinctual formation over a period of time. For example, you see the dog, turning round and round before it lies down to sleep, because long time ago, when its ancient ancestors lived in forest, maybe in the grassland, it had to do so in order to create some space to sleep. So that gets deeply encoded in the dogness of the dog, and it continues to do the same thing. So that's native condition, native freedom, which is also native unfreedom. For example, if someone has become a compulsive liar, then that person has squandered the native freedom to tell the truth. If someone has imbibed the habit of hating people for no rhyme or reason, that person has lost or renounced the freedom to love. If a person has abandoned the habit of working harmoniously in a team, what's called team spirit, then he has renounced the freedom to practice team spirit. So native freedom. Now, all of our moral freedoms, that's the most important thing to say, all of our moral freedoms are native to us. And they also constitute what is unique about the human species: the freedom to love, even when we are not loved; the freedom to tell the truth, even in a society which swears by untruth or lives by untruth; the freedom to practice justice even when injustice is meted out to you; the freedom to be compassionate even when the general culture is cruel and hard-hearted, so on and so forth. Or, as we often say, the freedom to swim against the tide. That also is freedom. The freedom to take the road less traveled by, as the American poet Robert Frost says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So the freedom to take the road less traveled by. All these are native freedoms. Now, also the freedom to work for the well being of others. Now, this is not a characteristic of animals to the best of our ability, though. Ants, when they form colonies, they work hard, and the fruits of their labor benefit also other members in the colony. The same with honeybees, so on and so forth. Any animal or all animals that live in colonies have that kind of instinct by which they work also for each other's benefit. But you can't expect an ant or a honeybee to work for the benefit of ants and honeybees belonging to some other group. For its own group, yes. So they come up to the clannish, maybe up to the tribal level, but they can't come to the national or universal level. Now that freedom is native to us. The freedom to exceed prevailing limits is our native freedom. That's why improving day by day, week after week, month after month, year after year is native to us human beings. The Paris Olympics has just ended, the Summer Olympics in Paris 2024, where every athlete was competing with every athlete to improve upon the existing norms. And we know that the Olympics record in javelin throw was broken by Pakistani athlete. So this quest to improve on, now that is part of our native freedom. So if a society is free, that society must affirm, or if a society believes in human freedom, it must address the responsibility to enhance the conditionalities for exercising freedom. It also must respect and enhance the conditionalities for upholding and enhancing native freedom. The freedom to think, the freedom to articulate, the freedom to influence and impact, the freedom to carve out a different way of life, the freedom to choose as per one's conscience, which is embedded in the freedom of religion, which is freedom of conscience, Article 25 of the Indian Constitution. The freedom to choose what one eats, what one wants to wear, what one wants to eat. The freedom to live a life that's unharassed by others, so on and so forth. The freedom to be safe, if you like. So all these have to be respected if a society is to claim that it actually believes in freedom, besides celebrating freedom annually, which must be done. I have no doubt at all in my mind. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm fully with the nation in celebrating its divine gift of freedom. How can I believe that freedom is divine and not rejoice when freedom is celebrated? So that's absolutely clear. Don't get it wrong. What I'm saying is we have a duty not only to celebrate freedom, but also make freedom meaningful in the life of all citizens. Again, let me go back to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, the champion of our freedom. Gandhi sincerely believed that the freedom of India must be measured with the yardstick of the extent and quality of freedom available to the last man in the social chain, the Antyodaya, the upliftment and the empowerment of the last man, the lost and the least. Remember also in this context the talisman that the Mahatma gave to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. The desirability or otherwise of an economic or governmental policy must be measured in relation to the question as to whether or not that will benefit the least and the last man in our social spectrum. But that vision needs to be incorporated into our idea of freedom, into our celebration of freedom. But unfortunately, wherever in the world freedom is celebrated, it becomes only an elite exercise. It becomes an occasion to showcase the importance of people, the authority of the functionaries of the state and the power of the state. And therefore, the vast majority of the people begin to feel increasingly disconnected with all this ceremonial part of it, whereas freedom is equally important, perhaps it's even more important, the life of the poorer, more handicapped, underprivileged sections of our society. So, as we celebrate our freedom, we must pledge ourselves to cherishing our freedom. And cherishing freedom involves making freedom more and more meaningful in the life of all citizens without fear or favor, without any form of discrimination based on caste, gender, religion, economic status, educational status, what have you. A human being is a human being. The inviolability of a human being must be respected. The ultimate importance of a citizen must be respected, because that's the core dogma in democracy. So we are celebrating our freedom as a socialist, secular, democratic republic, committed to the four fundamental values stated in the preamble to the Indian Constitution, namely justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. So wherever these four cardinal principles are compromised, forgotten, or violated, freedom is under attack. And if that freedom is not protected by those who celebrate it, it amounts to hypocrisy, which can exist merely in the politics of hypocrisy, not in the politics of truth. So therefore, we conclude our thinking together by saying that if we are honest celebrators of the gift of freedom, we would reject the politics of hypocrisy or post-truth politics and go back to the Gandhian politics of truth. As Jesus said, truth alone makes you free. Truth alone makes you free. Untruth is a guarantor of slavery. We have to go back to the path of truth to ensure that our freedom is protected and enhanced. Let me conclude by making a reference to an author that I'm extremely fond of, as you know by now, Count Leo Tolstoy, who wrote a letter titled Letter to a Hindu in the first decade of the last century, where he says and argues quite convincingly that India went into a state of domination by forces external to it, where it is the Mughal domination of India or the British East India Company, which eventually paved the way for the British Raj domination of India. He says this 1,000-year-long slavery of India can be traced to one fact, namely that the Indian society never really lived by truth. And strangely, and of course, Count Leo Tolstoy doesn't say this, but the strange thing is that Hinduism is distinguished for its deep insight that God is truth, and yet the very same society invited foreign domination because of its incapacity to live by truth. This is a serious issue that we need to really ponder on. I don't want to say anything more about it because I can entrust this sliver of thoughts to all of you, because you're mature in your capacity to think, as I realize gladly from the quality and depth and profundity of the responses that I daily get from each of you, which enrich me a great deal. So, freedom is God's gift. It's precious, it is sacred. And if it is God's gift, if it is sacred, if it is spiritual, then the heart of that freedom is truth. And freedom, therefore, cannot be harmonized with the politics of untruth, the politics of hypocrisy, which is what has gained complete domination in our midst, which is not a hidden fact. We now very glibly talk about post-truth politics, not realizing that what it actually means is politics of hypocrisy, which is an assured recipe for the undermining of human freedom. Let that not happen to us. May freedom enlarge and enhance the life of the people. And may every Indian be free in every sense of the term, both conditional freedom and native freedom. Free indeed. Jai Hind.